Well, the outbreak is surging, the plague that's happening over there in the United States. Several states are reporting an increase in this problem. Idaho, Nevada, Oregon, and areas around Yellowstone, for example, are reporting these kinds of things. The so-called Mormon crickets have been invading large areas, spreading across the United States, especially in these three states we've already mentioned. Thank you very much for joining us in this live broadcast. We are live. Greetings to MT, to Rublox, to everyone who's joining, to Dominic over there. Greetings to everyone joining the community. To Donnie, greetings. Donnie. Edwin, how have you been, Martin? Greetings. Look, the thing is that, well, when people talk about plagues, they always give it that, let's say, apocalyptic, biblical touch and things like that. But it has nothing to do with that. Plagues are the most normal thing in the world that just happen, especially when there are extreme climates, when there are changes in the weather over several years. There are excesses of certain types of food, and those excesses cause plagues, right? That's the situation, right? So having said that, let's get into the details. In our town, Najera, Nidajon, they started to notice that there was a tremendous increase in this kind of problem, right? People even picked them up with their hands and showed images. So, these plagues have been reported in different areas. What exactly is a plague? Well, it's when there's an increase in insects that's, let's say, disproportionate, right? That's the issue. We shouldn't be afraid of words as they are, because that's what they're for. They're meant to be used, and they mean something. What do they mean? Well, they don't mean any apocalypse, none of those things, but they do raise some alarms because this can lead to situations. For example, in the crops, there could be situations of environmental imbalances, that kind of thing. What happens is that the local authorities have been reporting that the insects have been around since April, but they hadn't considered it a problem until the population of these little animals started to explode. And now, well, it's seen as a potential problem. They're called Mormon crickets, but they're not actually true crickets. They look more like grasshoppers and can reach up to 5 centimeters in length. One of the most important aspects of their behavior is that they are cannibals. They eat the weak, injured, and stragglers for food, which causes even more of these insects to be born. So their numbers keep rising, right? This behavior creates a kind of a constant march forward. They keep moving, they keep advancing, they keep going in huge moving masses that don't stop. They're like clouds of insects, right? As they move forward, they cause significant agricultural damage affecting entire crops. And that's the biggest problem. Suddenly, there can be problems with food in the fields, right? The authorities are on alert. Now, obviously, there are also solutions for this. We're going to talk about them in a moment. Okay. Meanwhile, aside from interpretations, right, of things, of strange things, right? That's not really for us to judge here. Our job is to provide more details. First, why does this situation happen? They are insects similar to grasshoppers that naturally live in the western United States. They are naturally there. The problem is when there are too many, when they become swarms that are too large. When there is less humidity and let's say fewer natural diseases in the soil, more eggs survive. And those eggs cause, well, let's say the population of these insects to explode. When this is reported and temperatures rise higher than normal, the eggs hatch earlier than usual. And then, too many individuals reach adulthood right when the crops are ready. And they start eating and reproducing more, and well, it becomes a real problem. If temperatures rise earlier than normal, the eggs hatch sooner and the individuals reach adulthood faster. Prolonged droughts can affect birds. They can affect reptiles, and because the birds, when there are enough birds, eat them. They are perfect food for birds and for reptiles too. The problem is when there aren't any. When there is a lot of drought, the number of birds decreases and the number of reptiles too. So then there's no one to eat them, and there are too many. Within these natural cycles, there are also tools that people use, mainly farmers, to eliminate this type of pest. We have to remember that this phenomenon or these phenomena happened a few years ago in the Sahel, the northern part of Africa. The only difference between the United States and this area is that in the United States, look, they don't think twice about it. They say there's an excess, there's a plague of this, here. And they start sending planes, even now with drones, and they start spraying this whole area. So the plague comes, they spray. The plague comes, they spray. And they don't let them through. I mean, the solution is quite effective and pretty fast. Yes, they're using chemicals, which sometimes cause controversy due to their effects. There are also other types. What happened in Africa that year was about, 3 or 4 years ago. What happened is that they didn't have a budget. They had to make a rough estimate of what was needed because it was also spreading through countries. And it was causing very serious problems, mainly in agriculture. So I remember that year, they were asking for, I think, $150 million. I think they raised about half, around 70. And with that, they tried to fumigate in sections, right? They were kind of making corridors, so to speak, so that it would go through a certain area. And they were fumigating the rest so it wouldn't spread too much. More or less, they managed to control it. What I'm getting at is that when there isn't enough funding, when they don't have many solutions, the problem is huge and it becomes international like it did that time. This time, it didn't. Plagues have sometimes come from the US to Mexico, and they're stopped quickly here. The same happens the other way. They're stopped fast over there too. So it usually doesn't spread too much. In fact, it's already news that 3 states have the problem because it's rare for something like this to happen, right? Like I said, not because it never happens. It actually occurs almost every year. It happens almost every year. It's just that they stop it right away, don't they? They put in insecticides or those things, the chemicals they use, and they get rid of it, right? Now, what are the immediate consequences? Especially everything they can destroy because they don't eat just any food. What they like is alfalfa, wheat, pastures, orchards, and livestock forage. That's what they like the most. And yes, they do cause $1 million losses, right? I mean, this is a problem. Yes, it's a problem. I'm not saying it's not, but it has a solution. Obviously, this means there is less food for cows and sheep. For example, certain food costs go up. We know it does have an effect, right? The problem is well known. When you see this on the road, don't get too confident because the roads get more slippery with so many insects. So suddenly they get thrown off, right? So if it ever happens to you, right, remember this. If you're on a motorcycle, in a car or whatever, and you brake where there are lots of insects, it can be more slippery. In fact, there have already been accidents, due to too many insects on the roads. Sometimes when it's excessive, visibility is reduced. But that's already too much. We're not reaching that level. There's a higher cost for biological control through insecticides or pesticides, right? There are agricultural losses and an increase in product costs. Basically, that's the main consequence. Geshen. This is closely related to intense drought. Less cold winters as well, because during harsh winters, pests in general decrease. For example, when you have a harsh winter, the following year, you'll have very few mosquitoes. But it has to be a harsh, really cold and prolonged winter. Because the eggs of insects, like mosquitoes for example, disappear when it's too cold. But it needs to be a longer period, not just one day at 5 degrees, as that's not enough. I believe it needs to be below 3 degrees for at least 5 straight days for those insect populations to really drop. So warmer springs can also cause problems, right? This has been a very warm spring in some regions of the United States. That could also be one of the reasons. Now, one of the most interesting consequences is we have to understand that it's a cycle that can be broken. And in fact, that gets done every year, or not every year, but fairly often, let's say, unless there is poor management. Yes, now, if it's not taken into account, I mean, let's say if a bad job is done and those states don't step up, then the problem is no longer about the pest itself, but about the person who is letting it go, right? So let's see what the people from Idaho, Nevada, and Oregon do, since they are the ones who currently have the chance to solve this problem, right? Being said, how are you, Francisco? Hello, Leonardo. A big greeting to you as well. That being said, let's get to our business, right? Let's move on to other important topics as well. We're probably going to be seeing images of this topic often. I mean, we're going to be seeing images of these little insects, right? Let's move on to other topics, to other important matters happening in the world. Today we posted a poll that we'll talk about tonight, and it's a little different from usual. We always ask you about geopolitics, about what's happening in the world, about things like that, right? But this time we posted a poll that's totally different, but very relevant to what's going on right now with the World Cup and all of that, right? We asked you about Messi and Cristiano, basically, since they're the two big stars. I know there are others, I know, but we asked you about these two players. Who do you prefer, Messi or Ronaldo? Right now, they're very close, very close. 56 think that, well, the number one, or let's say the one you prefer, right? Because it's not about number one or number two, it's about who you prefer. I mean, who do you prefer as a player? Who do you like more? Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi, right? And they're very close. I mean, the percentage difference is really small, and it's just the first 112 votes, so it could easily take a turn. In the end, it's just everyone's opinion. In the end, I insist, it's not so much about who's number one in terms of soccer. If he scored more goals or fewer, it's simply about who you prefer, right? That's the point. Now let's move on to other matters, other important topics. What's happening in the world? How are you, Gabriel? Hey Miguel, and hello to everyone in the community joining us. Today there were no surprises, right? Today there were no surprises in what's happening. Let's say in this tug of war that's going on. I think there weren't surprises like there were on other days, right? At least that's what's happening. Now let's move on to other important topics that are happening, things that are important regarding the Middle East. And in the end, well, I think this is especially worrying now, since we're living in a moment where if it doesn't break, it's this war mindset. Then we could be talking about this war. Remember what they say out there, right? If the war lasts more than a year, it lasts 10 years. There's kind of a rule. Let's say, well, it's not a written rule. It's something that, let's say, the wise men of the military say. They say when a war lasts more than a year, it turns into a war of at least 10 years. And this issue, well, it's not far from reaching. I mean, if we count that it started on February 28th, well, this isn't such a long war, but there are reports, and those reports are still unconfirmed. And I'm saying it today. I'll tell you why I'm saying this. Look, listen to this. Look, let's listen to this part. Listen to this. According to the reports, and I insist, this is something that several intelligence sites are already covering. They are reporting that attacks are happening again in southern Lebanon. If it could be, let's see, pay attention to this, it could be that it's also part of yesterday's activity. But look, the posts, it's only been 2 or 3 hours since images, photos, and videos of supposed attacks in southern Lebanon started to appear. If that's the case, then obviously the agreement is going to end, right? And it says, attempted clashes tonight in southern Lebanon, while Israel and Hezbollah exchange heavy artillery fire, MLRS launches, and small arms fire. According to reports, Israel has not used air power in tonight's clashes so far. Maybe not using air weapons is kind of trying to say, let's calm down, right? Because normally it would be planes and shooting and attacks, you know? I mean, even though what I'm saying is pretty intense, but the other day someone mentioned it somewhere. In that sense, maybe there was some truth in what Trump was saying. Because when he talks, there was a ceasefire and they were still going at it, right? Iran and the United States were fighting again. And you said that the ceasefire in that region is different. The ceasefire means shooting just a little, right? And honestly, yes, it's happened several times already. In fact, since the ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel was announced, there have been attacks on both sides every week. But they both say they're maintaining the ceasefire. So it's not surprising if they keep going at it like this, just not with really powerful attacks. I mean, not the usual, like, hey, Israel destroyed a building somewhere, or Hezbollah launched however many rockets into an Israeli town, right? In fact, these days, Hezbollah has been firing, yes, at places where there are Israelis, but military targets inside Lebanon. They haven't been attacking outside. At least until now, there are no reports that they've attacked outside, right? I mean, the same goes for Israel in these last few days. What does that mean? That they're limiting themselves to internal action so as not to, let's say, betray what they told the Iranians, that they were going to calm things down a bit. So, well, the tension is, as I'm saying, really intense. And strange things are happening. Strange things that I think we'll talk about in a moment live with Astrid. But I'll give you a preview of some things. For example, it catches my attention that Abbas Aragashi is either already on his way to the plane to go to Switzerland, or at least in the next few hours, he's going to leave. He's going to travel. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, who is more on the side, let's say, of Masoud Pezeshkian. He's a figure who is more moderate than the Supreme Leader and would be traveling to Switzerland to sign this agreement. If that happens, it means the signing is going ahead and that we might possibly see J.D. Vance heading in that direction. Everything has been said on both sides. All kinds of things are being discussed. Musk Mokhtava saying, no, it's the United States that's desperate. And Donald Trump saying today, no, you are the desperate ones because you came looking for us and who knows what else. We're not giving them anything, not a single peso. That's just internal political narrative. I mean, internally, they want to convince their followers that they're the tough ones, that they're the best, right? So you can imagine they think they're the toughest of all. That's basically it, right? I want to mention this because in the end, one thing is what they say publicly and another thing is what they actually do. And I would like us to look at both. First, what do they say, just for the gossip, right? But the reality, the facts, that's what really matters. If suddenly they're saying 1,000 things, but you see that the price of oil keeps dropping, but you see that the ships keep passing by. For example, this morning there was a risky situation where the Iranians fired into the air. Where do the oil tankers pass? Look, let's go to the map. But that was interesting because a very curious situation happened. Let's see. It's in the Strait of Hormuz. As you know, here are the countries. Oil from the Gulf passes through here, 20% of the world's oil, and the Iranians now control the Strait of Hormuz. And suddenly, when the ships were about to pass, the Revolutionary Guard fired into the air and everything had to stop. Right? All the ships said, damn, we can't go through again. But after that, 25 ships went through. This is today. It's the day when the most ships have passed since the start of the war, which was on the 21st February, which would really start around March 1st, so to speak. All of March, all of April, all of May, and so far in June, there hadn't been so many ships passing through. 25 in a single day. So it was good news in that sense. Yes. I mean, even though there were shots fired, even though there were tensions, there were no clashes. Despite that, 25 ships passed through. That's why I'm telling you, strange things are happening. On one hand, they show a lot of toughness. But on the other hand, they show that things are actually calming down. So let's stick to the facts, right? For example, right now, it seems like Israel and Hezbollah are apparently shooting at each other, right? And if you look at it from afar, you might say, well, they're not going all out. But the reality is no. And right now, we're reading it in an Israeli media outlet where they say there have been attacks from both sides, but they're contained. And then the reports coming from Iranian media say the same thing. I mean, yes, they're shooting at each other, but these are contained attacks, not massive bombings. So sometimes it's hard to tell when we're only seeing images from afar. You hear explosions, you see flashes. But when you see the report, you realize, look, these aren't airstrikes because they're not that. They're not. Okay, so you start to tell the difference. So for example, strange things happen. Right now, we need to confirm what's happening with J.D. Vance. We'll check again in a moment to see if there's already an announcement that he's going over there, because J.D. Vance said today, no, well, I'm not going to go. Yes, they're still shooting. They're still, attacking each other between Lebanon and Israel. I'm not even going to go anymore. No, supposedly it's a fine. I mean, who knows? Right? In fact, you all know, and I've said it many times, this negotiation to me is a mistake. And not because peace is a mistake. Peace is the ideal. Obviously, that's the ideal, but not peace at any cost. When peace comes at the cost of what's next being a nuclear program, because they say, no, the nuclear program won't happen. The only thing that's going to be signed is something very superficial that doesn't really commit Iran to much. But it will give them a lot of resources to basically do whatever they want. They're not even talking about recovering the nuclear material, which is at 60% enrichment. So they're not addressing the key points. They're not even touching anything about ballistic missiles. Come on, this is just... Yeah, no, they don't. There's no... it's not an agreement that's favorable in that sense. Also, since it's the Strait of Hormuz, it'll end up in Iran's hands. And that's a loss. That's why you'll see a lot of analysts saying Donald Trump lost. It's a tremendous loss. Why? Well, if you go and add and subtract, he loses more. If things stay like this, he loses more. The Gulf and all Gulf countries are US allies and thus aligned with the United States. Likewise, let me clarify, if it stays like this, many believe that there's a plan behind it, right? That there's something more going on that we're not seeing. Well, that brings us back to the same point. If it happens, we'll see it in the facts. But right now, we're not seeing that in the facts. Okay? Well, no, we can't, let's say, assume that it's going to be like that. Not until it happens. We'll see. Now, the other day, someone told me, and it made me laugh a lot. They said I should change the channel name and call it Live Speculation. And I told him that's perfect. Live speculation isn't bad. What is analysis? All geopolitical analysis is speculation, but it's not speculation. It's speculation based on situations, based on facts. But of course, whether they act on what you analyze, what anyone analyzes, it's still speculation. That's what it is. I think this will happen today. Who will win between Mexico and the other team? Chiquilla says this one will win. Why? She just thinks it will. Yes, and you're speculating. It's speculation. That's what it is. But it's like the person thought they were insulting me by saying that. If that's possible. Every analysis channel involves speculation. No, more than I have now, yes. If you have a time machine and you travel to the future and see exactly what's going to happen, and you come back and say, this is exactly what's going to happen. Well then, yes, that's what the magazine does. The Economist or Times or whichever one puts out those covers. Well, what they're doing there is speculation, right? Predictive speculation, as some people say, because in the end, it's based on that. Imagine how many journalists work there. One doesn't have this information. So they say, let's see what they want to happen. This. They add it up and throw it out there, right? It's the same with the Sims. All make guesses about what might happen. Often they're right, sometimes not. But people remember when they're correct. Well, no, that's the most common thing, right? But anyway, it's very interesting what's happening right now in Israel, in the Middle East, in Iran, in the United States, because what is happening these weeks will define the future of an entire region that is becoming a power. But it is also concerning because it's a power that is not democratic. Except for Israel, right? They have a kind of democracy. But except for Qatar, they're all monarchies, right? And they're being given a lot of trust. Because right now, they're the kings who have the money. These ones, well, let's say more or less, they're cool. They're more or less cool in terms of their relationship with the West. But one of these days, the son, the grandson, whoever ends up with the power later on, suddenly turns out to be a psycho or a madman. And they're going to have all the power in the world. I mean, just imagine what's being built there in terms of artificial intelligence. There's a lot of work being done on DNA. I mean, technologies that are headed to Mars. I mean, Saudi Arabia has a probe on Mars. I mean, that's the level we're talking about. These are countries that are advancing a lot in technology and economy and everything, but their future is very uncertain because they depend on an individual who's in power there, right? Anyway, how have you been? Big shout out to everyone in the community who's just joining us. Thank you so much. Let's go. Let's go. Victor, how have you been? Luis Vargas, how have you been? And the United States has the largest army in the world. They say in numbers, but also in quality. Luis says, Leonardo Pepe, Perez says, theoretical physics is also speculation until scientific experiments are done. You can't consider that theory valid exactly. Leonardo, greetings. Danny, how are you? And it's a very well-studied speculation with a lot of information, but it could be wrong, right? I mean, it might not be true. Exactly. Good point there. Danny, how has Perla been? Says greetings. Greetings. You know, Pepe talks about that elite meeting of Peter. Like, no. Let me check that. I'll check now. Thanks for the info. Say hi to Perla. How are things? Dorian, how have you been? Where have you been? I haven't seen you in a while. It's good to see you around here. But I mean, when I don't see you for a while, it makes me curious. So obviously I ask if you're okay. I hope you are. And I know that some of you do let us know. Well, some of you come and go, you know, sometimes you're here and sometimes you're not, right? But the community that's more active in the comments, those are the ones I notice when they suddenly aren't around, you know? But anyway, I hope you're doing well. Greetings, Dorian. He says, greetings from here, 100%. That's awesome, Dorian. Greetings also to Ro Ortega. How have you been, Ro Perla? She says, what's it called? I think greetings from Peto. Let's see, here we go. He says, I already have it open here, what you're telling me about. And I'm studying some very interesting things. Interesting. We'll talk about it in the 7th report in a moment. Just let me check it properly to see how it is. What? Ro says onion. Like, thank you so much for those likes. Greetings, Luis. Elisa, Sofia, how have you been? Ivan says, I should have thought about it. I'm not going yet. I'm not going. And the boss says that whatever goes wrong is my fault. Yeah, that's how it is. I mean, not this one. They send him because he's not running the operation he wants. But the one Trump orders, if it fails, he claims it's not his fault. He says, this is great. This one is perfect, 100%. What's the name of the program? Thank you very much, Cebolla. Perla, greetings, Digna. How have you been? Greetings, Marita. How have you been? Greetings and best wishes to Buenos Aires, Argentina. Veronica de la Cruz, Marita. Well, to the whole community that's joining, thank you very much. Hey, so let's move on to other matters. Let's go to other topics. We'll be right back in a moment. Thank you very much for joining us for this little while. I'll be back later. I'll be back in just a little while. I think it'll be no more than half an hour, but I don't even think it'll take that long. I mean, in about 20 or 30 minutes, we'll be live again. This time with the full live stream, we can talk more. I had this topic pending. So anyway, in just a moment, if you want, while you make yourself a coffee, we'll already be live. See you in a little while. Take care. See you later.